Hi, I'm Natalie Bouchard, and you're listening to Inside NC Labor, a podcast designed to inform and educate North Carolina citizens on the role that the Department of Labor plays in state government. Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Bouchard.
Hey everybody, this is Mary Catherine Revels.
And we're with Communications in the North Carolina Department of Labor. We have a very special guest. Shannon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Shannon Council. I am the Administrative Supervisor over the call center in Wage and Hour.
Great. We're so happy to have you here today.
Shannon's actually our first guest from the Wage and Hour Bureau, so we're really excited about this. First of many, we think. So.
Yes. We hope to have many more.
Right.
Could you first just talk about Wage and Hour a little bit and what y'all do over there?
Okay. So Wage and Hour enforces the Wage and Hour Act, which is youth employment, minimum wage and overtime, wage payment. So if you are not paid your wages, we take complaints for unpaid wages. If you think that you have not been paid minimum wage or you haven't been paid overtime, we take those type of complaints. And we answer questions about youth employment, among a lot of other things too, but those are the big things.
Right. Well, great.
I know, Mary Catherine, we were talking about before this, when we redid the website, which I know you had a lot to do with.
Yes, so we redid the website in 2017, so I can't believe it's been 2 years now, but we noticed when we were running all of our reports and our analytics that the youth employment certificate was our most clicked on item on our website, so we actually took that information and was able to place a button on our homepage so it's easily accessible for the youths that are coming to our website now. So that was a good thing, and I know it's a big thing that the Wage and Hour Bureau handles.
Yeah, it makes it easy for us when they call and they want to know how to get a youth employment certificate. It's on our homepage. Scroll down just a little bit, look for youth employment certificate, and click there.
Right.
Well, and I know this time of year, you know, we have winter break coming up and summer breaks as well from school. You guys get a lot of activity with that. So if you would you touch on like the process for youth employment certificates?
Okay. So youth employment certificates are available online, and that's the only way that you can get a certificate is through our website. Once you click on the youth employment certificate link on our website, it'll take you to a few pages of questions. One is about the Adobe Acrobat Reader. You have to have the Adobe in order to obtain the certificate. Then it'll ask you some questions about whether you're connected to a printer, because you have to print the certificate or you have to save the certificate when it appears on the screen, or you'll lose it and you won't be able to get it back. And then it will ask some questions about the age of the youth, whether they're 14 or 15, and whether the business that they plan to work at serves alcohol, a few questions that we ask up front. And then the final screen that you come to is going to be all of the information about the youth, their name, their mailing address, their phone number. Then it'll also ask all of the information about the employer, the name of the business, the address of the employer, the phone number. And then it'll ask for the industry, the type of industry that the youth is planning to work at. And then it'll ask some questions about what the youth is going to do, the job. You'll have to select the proposed job, and it's a long list of different jobs that you can select. And then once you go through all of those screens, you get the final screen is the actual certificate. Click on to create the certificate, it comes up, and you do have to print it at that moment, or you have to save it so that you can go back and print it later. Okay. So it's really simple.
And so then once they get the certificate, they print it, what's the next step?
So after you print the certificate, the youth has to sign the certificate, the parent has to sign the certificate, or their guardian has to sign the certificate. Then they take the certificate to the employer, and the employer signs the certificate and keeps it in their file. So it's a whole lot more simple than it used to be.
Right.
We've simplified the process a lot.
Yeah.
And I know one question that we get in the communications office a lot is, do they have to have a job offer before they fill it out? And that's a big one. I think people, if they're looking a job, they start filling out their youth employment certificate, but you actually have to have that job offer before you print that youth certificate out.
Yeah, we prefer that you have a job offer because it's very important that the certificate is completed with the proposed job. Because the way our system is set up, it is set up to weed out, so to speak, different positions or different jobs that maybe a 14 or a 15-year-old cannot do, but a 16 or a 17-year-old can do those. So it's important that we know the type of work that the youth is going to do when they fill out the certificate.
What are some of those restricted occupations?
So 14 and 15s are very limited in what they can do. Retail, fast food restaurants, but they cannot work in manufacturing. They cannot work at a restaurant that serves alcohol. The 14 and 15-year-olds are really limited to retail type establishments and restaurants, fast food restaurants that don't serve alcohol. And then once you get to 16 and 17, there are a little less restrictions. They can work in manufacturing, of course. They can't operate a large piece of equipment. They can work in construction at 16, 17, but they can't operate any, heavy machinery. They still can't. There's still limits on 16 and 17, but they are lifted a little bit once they turn 16.
And so why is the youth employment certificate required? I guess you might have touched on that a little bit about the detrimental occupation.
Right. The youth employment certificate is required through the Wage and Hour Act. There is statutes in the act that require the youths have the certificate, and it is a safety for the youth that they aren't performing a job that could injure them, or if there's a law in the Wage and Hour Act that would prevent them from doing it. And there are federal restrictions too that we abide by. We won't allow them to do anything that the federal U.S. Department of Labor says is hazardous.
Okay. So I know you just talked about the current process for the youth employment certificates, and I know there's something in the works to modify it a little bit. Would you touch on that?
Yeah, so the new process that we have, that we're working on, it will have the youth go into our website just like they do now, and they will enter their information only, and they'll get what we call a unique identifier. They'll take that number to their employer. They'll give the number to the employer, and the employer will plug that number into our website for verification that the youth's age and that they're able to work and what they're able to do. And so the employer is more responsible for getting the certificate for the youth instead of the youth and the parents getting the certificate for the employer. So then the employer is notified immediately of what the youth can do and what type of restrictions that there are. And the employer goes through the process of getting the certificate. The parent is notified, so there will be a process of the youth getting their unique identifier. The parent will be notified that they have to come in our website and kind of sign off on the youth being employed, and then the employer will ultimately be the one to enter what they plan to have the youth doing and enter their information, and any restrictions will be given to the employer. They will be notified of what the restrictions are.
That's great.
Is there a reasoning behind changing the process?
Well, we have had a little bit of problem with certificates being issued for youths to work, 14 and 15-year-olds, to work at a restaurant that serves alcohol. And the reason they're being issued is because the certificate process asks the youth if there's alcohol served at the business. And they don't, sometimes youths are not aware that what that means. And so they say, no, there's not any alcohol being sold at the premise. And so the certificate is issued, and it's an erroneous certificate. It should not have been issued. And so we think that if the employer was more active in having the certificate issued, they know more about what they serve and the type of business they operate and the type of job they want the youth to do. And so we think that it's just better to have the employer more hands-on in getting the certificate for the youths, because the employer is ultimately responsible for making sure the youth is not hurt or is following the laws.
Right.
This is all going to be happening in the next year or so I think we'll definitely have Shannon back on to maybe talk a little bit about that again when it gets closer.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah. Do you know around how many youth employment certificates are filled out, like in a year? Do you have any statistics on that?
I can tell you that for the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had at least 300 certificates a day. During the summer, it's a lot more. I would say more like 400 or 500 certificates per day. We're getting into the school year, and it's kind of, the numbers have gone down a little bit because the kids are going back to school. But yeah, we're still getting, it's November, and we're still getting at least 300 certificates a day.
Wow.
Per day.
So once you fill out the certificate, say you were 14 years old with your first job, do you have to keep filling that out every year, or does it transfer over?
The certificate is good as long as you're still employed with the same employer. So if a 14-year-old starts working for McDonald's at 14 and they work for McDonald's until they're 17, that certificate is still good. If they change employers, though, then they have to get a new certificate.
Okay. Makes sense. Are there any other questions that y'all frequently get all the time that you want to address?
We do have some problems with getting an error message. So a youth goes in our website and they enter a certificate, and for whatever reason they click the button on our website that says create certificate for printing, and then they don't see the certificate, and so they hit the back button a couple of times and they do it again, and then they receive an error message that says you can't get this certificate, there's been an error, you need to call our call center, our 800 number. We do get some complaints about that because they just get frustrated, but it's that Adobe. If you have pop-up blockers on your computer, then when you get ready to click through and create the certificate, if you get that error message, it could be because you have pop-up blockers turned on. So what happens when you click that button, it takes that certificate and it puts it in a new window. But if you have pop-up blockers on, then you won't be able to see that certificate. So then when you go back, when you click back a couple of screens and then go forward, the system thinks you're trying to duplicate a certificate that's already been issued. So then it gives you an error message and says, hey, you can't get a certificate for the same person, same employer. So if they can call our 800 number, our call center will be happy to help them. We can delete that certificate, and then they can go through and we'll walk them through the process of getting the new certificate. That would probably be the biggest problem that we hear, is that error message, but it's all about those pop-up blockers, and if you don't have the Adobe, and sometimes if you're on a cell phone doing the certificate, sometimes you'll get that error message, but we can clear it out. Just call the 800 number.
So speaking of, what is the 800 number for our listeners?
Yeah, it's 800-625-2267.
And there's a great call center with everybody waiting for your call.
That's right.
And our website is labor.nc.gov for anybody else that's not familiar with that. So that's where you can actually find the option to go through that process of creating the youth employment certificate.
And I know in communications we get a lot of questions, and we pretty much send them over to y'all about any kind of wage and hour. We'll say, call the number. They'll answer, and they'll get everything that you need.
Right.
So,
We can do it.
Great.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and it was great to have our first wage and hour guest with us.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for tuning in, y'all. Remember, your safety is our priority.